everybody, Ramey here, and today I want to talk about a topic. I want to talk about the difference and similarity between learning sciences and instructional design. These are both two terms that are thrown around interchangeably sometimes and sometimes meant to be something very different. You know, as an instructional designer myself for the last 20 years, I hear myself being called lots of things, whether that's a educational technologist, instructional technologist, multimedia designer, multimedia developer, project manager, training manager, performance improvement specialist, process engineer. I've been called lots of different things, all pretty much meaning the same thing, sometimes meaning something very different. And these terms can mean something very different depending on who you talk to. So I want to kind of break down these two terms, because I see a lot of discussion about learning sciences versus instructional design, and I wanted to do some research and really look into and dig in to find out, well, what are the differences between these two things? All right, let's begin. So the first thing I did is I looked at the basic definitions of these fields, from a couple different perspectives to try to find out what they really are. So learning sciences, the basic definition, which is from ISLS, the International Society of Learning Sciences, so define the field as follows. Researchers in the interdisciplinary field of learning sciences born during the 1990s study learning as it happens in real-world situations and how to better facilitate learning in designed environments. For example, school, online, workplace, home, and informal learning environments. So the learning sciences studies real-world situations and determines how to better facilitate learning in these types of environments. Okay, that's the basic overall definition of learning science. So then we get to instructional design, and I am on the International Board of Standards for Training, Performance, and Instruction. There's also AACT, there's ATD, there's a number of different places I can look for the basic definition. But this goes through, and this is the place where it's talking about instructional design or competencies. And I think they did a good job of kind of summarizing the different things that instructional designers do. Instructional designers help individuals and organizations in increasingly diverse contexts expedite the learning process through the deliberate use of learning strategies, resources, and technologies. Let's read this definition again. Study learning as it happens in real-world situations to better facilitate learning in design environments like in school, home, workplace. Help individuals and organizations in increasingly diverse contexts expedite learning processes through the deliberate use of learning strategies, resources, and technologies. Reading these two definitions back and forth, I could keep doing it all day. I'm not seeing I can't really tell what they're doing differently. This goes on to say instructional designers are called to play many roles, including performance analyst, project manager, strategic and learning consultant, researcher, instructor, writer, project manager, media, web developer, etc., etc. So I'm reading these two definitions and I can't seem to see a difference. Okay, so then what I did is I said, okay, well, I'm not necessarily getting a pull of what this difference is. I'm not getting a feel. I'm not reading, I'm not understanding, maybe I just don't understand it enough. So the best thing to do would be to search the jobs, because the jobs between these two things are going to differ since they're different fields. So what I did is I went to a multiple job boards and I found the same thing. Let me go through my results. So right here, what you can see is an example. So this is Indeed.com. And I went to LinkedIn. I've been searching other job boards, just searching Google for jobs. And what I found is that I couldn't actually find a job in the learning sciences. Not one. Now, let me rephrase that. I could find jobs in the learning sciences for professor of learning sciences or a professor of learning sciences hiring a research assistant in the learning sciences. But I couldn't find any actual other jobs in the learning sciences. And as I scroll down here, you can see if I read through these, none of these will be for learning sciences. In fact, when I click on them, they'll ask for an instructional designer. Let's just look, senior learning professional, instructional design right away, first thing they mention. So I can't find a job that's even asking for someone in the learning sciences. Okay, when I go to instructional design, though, there's tons of jobs asking for an instructional design. And all these same jobs that were for the learning sciences are in the instructional design. So I started to get a little confused and thought, maybe I'm just still missing a big picture here. So I went to the International Society of Learning Sciences, as I thought, well, hey, they'll be able to help me out. So no, same thing. Assistant professor of learning sciences, postdoc research in learning sciences. And then they had some weird jobs that didn't really have anything to do with learning sciences, like dean of college of education and some stuff like that. But they were all based on a program in the learning sciences, hiring someone in the learning sciences, no other job. So then what I did is I went to one of the programs in the learning sciences, which is Northwestern. They're one of the only actual learning science programs. So there's a bunch of colleges out there that talk about learning sciences in their description, but they're not called learning sciences. They're called like learning design, technology, learning design training, ed tech and learning sciences, instructional design and there's something else. So they can say they're instructional design and they can basically say they're everything in one. So Northwestern has one of the only this is learning sciences. So I didn't look at the Ph.D. because the Ph.D. is designed for the researchers and really designed for faculty. So what I did is I went to the masters because they're designed for people to go out and work. But what I got was they were telling people to basically go into jobs that instructional designers do. In fact, they were actually saying go into jobs instructional designers. They were saying be an instructional designer. All the jobs were to be an instructional designer or to be things like a vice president, but this isn't an MBA. I looked at their curriculum. There's no project management classes or anything like that. So I didn't quite understand that one. But they're telling people to do the job that an instructional designer does. So what I got from all of this is that the job that learning sciences go for is the same job instructional designers do. Unless you're trying to be a learning science professor. So I've searched high and low. I can't find anything else. I've reached out to Twitter and LinkedIn. No one has responded as far as saying they found a job in learning sciences that an instructional designer didn't do. So then I went a step further, and I think I tried to find some more differences. So what I did is I really started, I looked at the degree requirements for Northwestern because they're one of the only just learning science programs. And basically what I could find is that it doesn't sound like they use one standard model. So instructional designers rely on ADDIE, and there are 1,000 different versions of ADDIE, like Dick and Carey, Morris and Kemp, rapid development, whatever you decide to use. There's other methodologies out there like Agile and stuff. So whatever you're trying to use, those are all things instructional designers use. So what I got is that the learning science dedicated programs don't seem to focus on one of them. So they kind of took that instructional design, the actual curriculum development piece out, and focus more on the theory and research side. At least that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm thinking as going through the curriculum of these different programs. That's what I'm thinking. But my big question is, if you've done that, how can you apply to an instructional design job when you haven't learned the curriculum design part of it? So that's a confusing thing. That's a confusing thing to me because you've got to be able to walk in and do those processes. And if you're telling me that your program is teaching those, then you are just an instructional design program labeled something different. So those are all some confusing points to me. So I'm trying to figure out where the disconnect is here. So I'm thinking the disconnect. So when I go to the ATD competency model, ATD or TD, or ASTD, what they used to be, has been the professional organization for instructional designers, right? So the way they break up their competencies, they have an actual label called instructional design, which they're just referring to the actual curriculum development side. But each one of these things, change management, performance improvement, this is what we expect an instructional designer to be able to do. These are the competencies an instructional design program would teach someone to go through. So maybe when I see someone saying there's a difference between the two, that's what they're referring to. They're referring to we're not an e-learning developer. And maybe that's where the disconnect is. didn't really understand exactly what instructional design means as a whole. And that's a problem with instructional design, is that we do a bad job of trying to say what we are. The field always has that just mix up. And I think it's just because like there are HR departments who hire trainers and say they're instructional designers. And then that, goes through to everyone. It's the same thing. Like we're still talking about learning styles in schools when we have no evidence to support them. Like things like that just keep going and going. And it causes confusion among everyone. So I think that's what's happening here. But, I'm really trying to understand the difference and I can't figure it out. I can't find any jobs in the learning sciences, which is really confusing to me, because if you're going to start a graduate program and you're going to start something, the thing is, you ask yourself, you do a needs analysis, a performance analysis, this gap analysis, front-end analysis, and you say, what gap are we filling here? And what jobs does this lead to? If your jobs lead to instructional design jobs that are already being filled and met, then you're not filling a gap. So I'm trying to find out what that gap was. And it looks like, in the learning sciences, they focus more on research, but that's at the PhD level, and that's what PhD instructional designers do too. So that's what else is confusing. And I see a lot of the learning sciences seem to focus on design-based research, which is fine, but that doesn't define the field, because an instructional design PhD could have focused on design-based research as well. So what I'm saying is, until I find jobs out there that a learning science professional is qualified for, that an instructional designer is not, I will start to see the difference and say there's an actual difference between these two fields. Until I can do that, I cannot say there's any difference between these two. And I'm not counting like faculty of learning science that requires the degree. Besides those kind of positions, there is no job out there for it. So it's very difficult to say, yes, there is. Now, if you're trying to say, well, I'm focusing on this, this, and this, that not all instructional designers do, you're missing the point, because not all instructional designers at the PhD level focus on the same thing whatsoever. Some of them focusing on like multimedia learning, cognition. Some of them are focusing on design-based research or different kinds of qualitative questions or very statistical analysis or big data, because all PhDs have their own field of study. So you can't break it down like that, or we would have 100 different fields. It doesn't work like that. Anyway, thank you.